Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. Is alcohol najis? We get this question all the time. First of all, to understand what is alcohol. In chemistry, any hydroxyl functional group bound to a saturated carbon atom can be considered alcohol. But not all of those can intoxicate a person. So what is alcohol in the Sharia is what we call khamar. What is khamar? Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam told us, kullu muskirin khamarun wa kullu muskirin haramun. Anything that intoxicates is considered khamar, and every khamar, every intoxicant is haram. So that doesn't mean anything that's called alcohol will be khamar, because methanol alcohol, for example, will cause you to go blind or die before it intoxicates you. Other types of ethanol, which is usually ethanol is the one that intoxicates, called grain alcohol. But there are types called denatured, where it's physically impossible to get drunk from it, because when you drink it, it will cause you to throw up or go blind because it's mixed with methanol before you can get drunk from it. So those types of alcohol compounds that do not intoxicate you, that you cannot physically drink enough or drink and not throw up without getting intoxicated, are not considered khamar. On the other hand, anything like beer, wine, vodka, bourbon, all those kinds of alcohol, whether they're made from grape, whether they're made from barley, whether they're made from nabid, which is made from dates, or whether it's made from anything else like this, from honey mixed with many of these types of intoxicants, or all of that would be considered khamar, shari'an. So, drinks that are common nowadays like champagne, those get you drunk. Those are meant to get you drunk. Those are considered khamar. Tayyib, we know they're najis in the ma'nawiyya, in the spiritual sense, but are they najis in the physical sense? So let's see what the Quran tells us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran, بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم, إنما الخمر والميسر والأنساب والأزلام رجس. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, verily khamar, alcohol, the one that gets you drunk, khamar, and maysar, games of chance, gambling, and ansab. Al-ansab were altars where sacrifice would be made to other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and azlam, where they would use arrows for fortune telling. All of this is rijs from the amal of shaitan. This is from the works of shaitan. Tayyib. But what does it mean, rijs? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam explained the word rijs in the hadith. Allahumma a'udhu bika min rijsin and najis. Rijs and najis, this is sifa ma'suf. Mawsuf here, it explains the sifa of what rijs is, that it is najis. Tayyib, so all the ulama of Islam agree that the Quran has called khamr najis. But is it a spiritual najis, like gambling and sacrifice at altars to other than Allah, and fortune telling using arrows? Or is it a physical najasa that if it gets on your body you have to clean it? Tayyib, so in the Quran, why do we consider the lahm al-khanzir, the meat of pigs, to be physically najis? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, lahm al-khanzirin فَإِنَّهُ رِجْسٌ in Surah Al-An'am, in the 145th ayah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls the khinzir, the pig, rijsun. And based on this, we say this is a physical najasa and a spiritual najasa. Eating pork has a spiritual aspect, but it's also a physical najasa. So those things, linguistically, the usuliyin say, that are called rijs in the Quran, that you can use both means of najasa for, meaning physically and spiritually, then that's applicable. If you cannot, meaning like, for example, a arrow fortune telling is not going to be physically najis, but that's going to be spiritual najis. So this is the ulama of tafsir and usuliyin that explain this. For example, Al-Qurtubi says that the jamhur, the most of the ulama of Islam, they all agreed that these ayat show khamar to be physically, hissiyya, physically najis. Tayyib, but do we have a dalil that this is physically najis? Yes, we do. From the Sahih hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, from Abu Tha'laba radiyallahu anhu asked Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The riwayah is in Al-Bukhari, but the longer version that I'm mentioning is in Abu Dawood, and it's authentic hadith, where he told Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Nujawir ahlul kitab, we are people who live next to ahlul kitab, وهم يطبخون في قدورهم الخنزير ويشربون في آنيتهم الخمر. That these ahlul kitab, they cook in their pots and pans the lahm, the meat of khinzir, of pigs, and they drink in their cups and bowls and the alcohol. Can we eat and drink from their dishes? Rasulullah said, don't do that. Drink in other than it, illa, except if you cannot, then to wash them with water and then you can eat and drink in them. Tayyib. Now this is very important. Why would you have to wash them? For example, a cup that somebody drank alcohol, but there's no more alcohol in it, they finished the alcohol. If this was just a spiritual najasa, then that cup would not be physically najis. You could drink in it because there's no alcohol left in it. But just like the hukm of the pig, Rasulullah ﷺ tied it. The hukm of the pig is that it's physically najis. It has spiritual najasa, but it's physically najis. So you have to wash those dishes before you can cook and eat in them. Rasulullah, as he mentioned that, he also said those cups and pots that they drink alcohol in have to be washed before you can drink in them, even if the alcohol is gone. So this Sahih Hadith clearly shows that the najasa is a physical najasa. Otherwise, why would there be a hukm to wash them? Tayyib? Meaning, if a kafir drank water in a cup, you don't have to wash that cup. Like the mushrika that brought water to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in her pouch, and he and the Sahaba, they drank from it, made wudu in it, different riwayat. They didn't have to wash it. Why? Because it's water. But when it came to khamr, Rasulullah ordered that even if the khamr is gone, you have to wash that dish before you use it. This is a dalil. At the Quran, mentioning rijsun is a spiritual and physical najasa. Tayyib. What about the ulama of Islam? No doubt that Jamhur, in fact, all of the four madhab, the Hanafi madhab, the Maliki madhab, the Shafi'i madhab, the Hanbali madhab, they agree that the pig and alcohol are physically najis. Tayyib? Just as the pig is najis, alcohol is najis physically, and a spiritual najasa for both of them. If you look in Al-Mughni of Ibn Qudama for the Hanabila, for example, or the works of Al-Buyuti, for example, the Sharh of Muntaha Al-Iradat, they clearly mention Al-Insaf, Mardawi, that the Mu'tamid of the Hanbali madhab is that alcohol is physically najis. Same thing with the Shawafi'ah. If you look at the Mu'tamid opinion of the Shafi'i madhab, in the Nawawi's works, in the Majmu' and so on, alcohol is physically najis. For the Hanafi madhab, in the Hashi of Ibn Abidin, in the Fath al-Qadir of Ibn Hammam, and other books that are Mu'tamid, well-known books of the Hanafi madhab, they mention that this is a physical najasa that has to be washed. And the same with the Malikiyah, for example, Ibn Abdul Barr or Al-Mudawwana and Sharh al-Kabir and so on. The Maliki madhab mentioned this as well. So all four madhab agree. Even the Zahiri madhab, Ibn Hazm in Al-Muhalla says that khamr is physically najis. Ibn Hazm even states that there is ijma', there is consensus of the Muslim Ummah. Ibn Hazm in Al-Muhalla says there is consensus of the Muslim Ummah that alcohol is physically najis. Not just him, Ibn Hammam, the great Hanafi scholar in Fath al-Qadir, he also, Ibn Mufli al-Hafidh, the grandson, in Al-Mubdi' Sharh al-Muqni' shows that there is ijma', consensus of the Muslim Ummah that this is najis. Now, there are some a'imma and ulama that have taken a different view, that especially recently, that this is a spiritual najasa, and there were some ulama in the past. But there is no doubt that all four of the well-known madahib and the Jamhur, the vast majority of the ulama, agree on this issue. Tayyib, last thing on this issue. If we look at the Quran, we find the word rijs. Just as it's used for khinzir, it's used for alcohol. If we look at the ahadith, we don't have a single hadith where Rasulullah, some of the Sahaba, drank in a bowl where there was alcohol in it prior to it without washing it. We don't have any. Some people say, oh, well, they poured out the alcohol on the streets of Medina. Yeah, you can throw something najis in the street. This is not something that, something that's a dalil that is not najis, right? And if you look at the hadith of Abu Tha'laba and Abu Dawud, no doubt it's clear that Rasulullah ordered washing of those dishes that alcohol was in. If you look at the Jamhur ulama, this is a clear mas'ala that alcohol is najis ma'nawiyya, in a spiritual, in a sense, and hissiyya, in a physical sense, that has to be washed. How many times does it have to be washed? This is not mentioned number in hadith. So what is well known from the hadith about the one that wakes up from sleep and any najasa that gets on him is 3 times. This is the mu'tamid, as Ibn Qudama has mentioned, to wash that 3 times. So if something has alcohol, it's najis and it needs to be washed. But if the alcohol is such that it does not intoxicate, then we do not consider that to be najasa. Rather, we say that is tahir. For example, methyl or other types of ethanol alcohol that have been denatured so they cannot be intoxicants. Jazakumullahu khairan.